ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud of being invited to this university. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, the topic that was chosen for me was the future of work. I liked to talk about the future of work because by definition the future is uncertain. So I can tell you anything I want and you can't prove that I'm wrong, at least not in the near future. So of course everyone sees a different future in these days, and uncertainty is now the problem we are dealing with. And of course I would say paint the future with trade wars or tariff wars, with trade conflicts, with maybe a more isolated Europe, or even a more, hopefully more resilient Europe. But the consequences would be, I would say, more deglobalized work and less growth and less wealth. And I don't like this future, so I have chosen another one. I like to paint the future, and I think the most serious way of forecasting a future is first to look back. I think this is the best way, or the most serious way. But of course you find future scientists, I will call them like that, tell other stories than I do. So, but I start with looking back, and I start with GDP growth rate in Austria. I will go on the European view, but also, of course, on the Austrian too, that was agreed on. And here what you see is the growth of GDP between 2009 and 2023. With the blue line is the European Union, and the red one is Austria. We often start as labor market expert in the year 2009, because it was the year of the big crisis on the Austrian labor market. At this time we didn't know the year 2020 and COVID, but we started with 2009. It was the problem of Lehman Brothers and very strong increase in unemployment at this time, and of course a degrowth of 4% in 2009, a very deep recession. But fortunately then there was a lot of growth, and Austria, the Austrian economy worked quite well. But then between 2011 and 2016, Austria had fewer growth than the European Union, and that was a problem, because especially during these years we had a lot of migration, and that was interesting because more people, of course, need more goods and more services, and normally a state with a lot of immigration should develop very good, but it didn't in Austria. So to look at the unemployment figures, these are the Eurostat figures where unemployment is measured, and you see that Austria was quite stable, with about between 5 and 6% of unemployment rate in Austria, but especially in the years 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, the Austrian unemployment rate was rising. And in the same time, the European Union unemployment rate was really declining very quickly. And so you see that our favorable position here, we've lost. That's what happened in these years. In 2010, 11, 12, and 13, we had the lowest unemployment rate in Europe, which, it's clear my job is quite cool when you have the lowest unemployment rate in Europe. No one can criticize your work, not at all, and it was quite easy in that time. But my personal Halloween was in October 2013, where Germany overtook us, and suddenly we were second place, and second place is first loser. This was the moment where politics was suddenly looking at the unemployment figures again. Before it was very easy, not really a political problem in Austria. It doesn't matter how high the unemployment is when you have the lowest rate in Europe. Okay, so, and then what happened in these years? This is interesting to see because it's really a quite huge difference that were lost in this time. What happened in these years? First, now this is the actual situation. This is the latest figures from January 2025, where we with very slightly better than the average right now. So we have I think it's, I don't know, 13th unemployment, highest unemployment in Europe. But it's interesting to see which countries are in front, because in the past these were not the countries that had very good figures. Now it's the Czech Republic, it's Poland, it's Slovenia, it's Germany. But we have a lot of Eastern European countries. It's Hungary, Croatia, Slovakia, Bulgaria, and so on. And what happened in these times? Of course, they had quite good growth in these years, but on the other hand, there was a lot of emigration in these countries. And where did the people go to? And you see it here. What I have done on that slide is the change in the labor force potential compared to the previous year. It's look very complicated, the slide, but let me explain. In 2011, we had about 60,000 more workers in Austria. 60,000 more people on the labor market. What means on the labor market? Very simple. It's just the sum of either employed people or unemployed people, nothing more. And this is the difference to the year before. Labor market experts always like to compare with last year because we have a very strong seasonal component. So in spring, unemployment is always going down, like now. We have every month fewer unemployed people, and in autumn it's rising again because the agricultural sector or the construction sector, when it gets cold, becomes unemployed, people from there. So within 1 year, 2011, we had 60,000 more people in the Austrian labor market in comparison to 2010. And where did the 60,000 come from? This is here shown in the colors. It's interesting. In the dark gray here, these are people, foreigners from, we called them new EU members at that time. Nowadays we wouldn't say new EU members, but in that time we called them new EU members. These are people from 10 EU states which joined the European Union in 2004, on the 1st of May 2004. So it's Hungary, Slovenia, the Czech Republic, Poland, and so on. And these people had a transition period for the free movement on the labor market, for free working, that lasts till the 1st May of 2011. So the first year with really a free labor market was 2012. And what you see on that slide very clearly is in 2012, the most of them, the strongest increase was registered. So about 30,000 people were more on the labor market in 2012 and then in 2011. So this is the dark gray. The light gray, this is Romania and Bulgaria. They joined the European Union later. The transition period was over on the 1st January of 2014. So you see highest increase in 2014. Very simple on that slide. In red one, these are the people from Croatia. Every year, where they have been already within the European Union, they started, I think, in 2013. You had about 2,000 or 3,000 more Croatian workers in Austria, 2,000 or 3,000 every year, because, as I said, it's always compared to the year before. Okay, and the end of the transition period was in 2020, and we were forecasting about 10,000 more Croatian people on the Austrian labor market, but it didn't happen because of COVID. But you see, after COVID, the red goes broader, so you see more and more people are working from Croatia. So in light blue, these are the Germans. Every year, about 3,000 or 4,000 people from Germany start to move to Austria, work in Austria, live in Austria, and so on. And the Germans are the biggest foreigner group on the Austrian labor market. Slightly more Germans than Hungarian, about 110,000 people working in Austria. And this is really something that changed. When I was a kid, much more Austrians were working in Germany than the other way around. But now it's double more Germans working in Austria than the other way around. Why Germans? What they do? Who's from Germany here? Welcome. Normally you come either to work in the tourism sector. This is the first, because we have higher wages in tourism than the Germans. So if you live in Eastern Germany, for instance, and you want to go for a seasonal work to a skiing hut or something, you can either go to Bavaria or to go to Salzburg. And in Salzburg is better paid, and you're also not at home, so you go to Salzburg. This is the first reason why you come to Austria. The second reason is people come to study in Vienna, to study in Austria, and normally they fell in love here. So that's your case here. And then they stay. This is the second case. So every year, more and more Germans are joining Austria and staying here. With the middle blue, these are EU old, without Austria and Germany, so Italy, France, Netherlands, and so on. They are fewer than the Germans, so 2,000 every year. In dark blue here, these are third country nationals. So at the beginning of the slide, most of them came from Turkey or the former Yugoslavian states, so family reunion and so on. And at about 2015, it was the increase of the refugees movement. So on the slide, people from Syria and Afghanistan, these are the two strongest groups. On the slide, they appear the moment they are allowed to work in Austria. So the moment they get asylum. So, and you see, when you just look between 2010 and 2019, within 10 years, about 40,000 a year, 400,000 additional workers moved to Austria, which is an enormous figure for a small country. When I was in school, we had 7 million inhabitants in Austria. Now we have more than 9. So an enormous change in Austria of growth. And then these nearly transparent group up here, these are the Austrians themselves. And it's interesting because they are also increasing. Why? We also have a demographic change in Austria, of course. We have more people aged 65 plus than 15-year-old. But the question how many people are on the labor market is not only how many are 65 and how many are 15, but how many between 15 and 65 are on the labor market. How many of them are working, how many are out of labor force. So as more and more female workers start to stay shorter period at home when they get babies and so on, more and more people are working. And even if the pension retirement age is going up, you have more people on the labor market. For instance, this hill here, or mountain, I would say mountain Matterhorn, up here, for instance, this was a change in our pension system, a small reform called Hackler-Regelung. Hackler-Regelung was a possibility to retire at an earlier age if you have more than 45 years, or have 45 years. And they changed this rule, and this was the reason for more Austrians on the labor market, so on. So, within these 10 years, about 500,000 more workers every year, 50,000 plus, have been on the Austrian labor market. So, our companies in Austria had absolutely no problem in finding staff. It was very easy for them because every year you get very good, fresh people like you from Germany. Many people from the Eastern European Union came to Austria. Well-educated young people, motivated people. So it was very easy for the Austrian companies. And at that time, I had a lot of talks with companies that said, is there a technological tool, is there a software that helps us to choose from 300 applicants, 10 that are suitable? Is there an electronic solution and so on? This completely changed now. Now I have a lot of talks with companies that say, can you help me? I have no applications. I have no interesting candidates for my job. What's the matter now suddenly? And so on. So forget about 2020, this was Corona. So, but then in 2021, something changed on that slide. We have still, again, the growth was not that good before, but we had about 40,000 foreigners on the Austrian labor market. And then suddenly the blue line is here. So 25,000 Austrians were fewer on the labor market. This is demographic change. You see it the first time in 2021, where suddenly there were only 15,000 plus within a year, which compared to other European countries is still a great figure, because in the whole Eastern European Union you have fewer inhabitants because they all moved to the West. And in the West you have, in some countries, a stronger demographic situation, which means also there are fewer people on the labor market. And in Austria, in this year, this was our weakest year so long, there have been only 15,000 plus. And this was the first year where suddenly we were talking about a lack of workers. And this was very strange year 2021, because when we started the year 2021, we had 600,000 unemployed people. It was COVID, the winter 2021, and the year ended with not only a lack of skilled workers, but the lack of workers. And so within a year, there was a very, very dynamic change. Who was the first sector who was arguing we can't find any workers? Who was the first sector? Hospitality, yeah. So tourism and hospitality. Why? Why is this sector the first one to cry out?
They need people in winter.
Huh?
They need people in winter.
They need people in winter, yeah. The reason for it is 40% of all workers in tourism sector changed the sector after 2 years. So every 2 years, and this was not a crisis phenomenon, it was also before COVID. Every 2 years, they need 40% new people. Why? Not because the jobs are so unfair. The main reason is, when do we go to a restaurant? We go at night, we go on the weekend, and we go during holidays. And these are the times where normal people with a family don't want to work. So they need more and more people. And the other thing is, we all like to travel or go skiing where there is a lot of nature. Where there is a lot of nature, there are not enough workers normally. So that's the reason why tourism sector is the only sector that has to offer flats and at the site there, because otherwise you can't find enough workers to live there. So in 2022, we had about an enormous increase, about 70,000, 65,000 additional workers on the labor market. Austrians are going down 26,000. So one could say, okay, for decades we discussed about demographic change. Now it started. But then something strange happened. 2023 it was only 14,000, and then it was 9,800. So the demographic change was slowed down. Why? What happened in 2024? Does anybody know? Something happened. Something strange happened. The female retirement age was increased by half a year. Starting with 2024, in Austria is the only country within the European Union where female retire 5 years earlier than men. With 60, regular age, and 65 men, regular age. We all retire earlier, but on regular it's 60 and 65. And in Austria, in 2024, it started to increase by half year every year. So the next 10 years, there is always the retirement age of women going up every year, half year. And this is about between 10 and 15,000 people every year addition on the labor market. And this is the reason why the demographic change is slowing down now, because we have an increase in the pension and retirement age. Did you notice that there was a big discussion about the pension reform last year? Or demonstrations on the street? Do you know which party wanted to do that? Have you seen a party that said, well, it's right, now we have to change the pension system? Have you seen that party? They have been election last year. Have you heard anyone say that's a good idea to change the pension system? No, why not? Why not? Maybe the professors know.
Because that happened a long time ago.
Yeah, that's right. this is by incident. 35 years ago, our High Court said that the different retirement age is not fair and has to be changed. And the government at that time, it was People Party and Social Democrats, decided we don't want to change it. It was in the end of the 90s. We don't want to change it. What does a government do if he doesn't want to follow the High Court, Constitutional Court? What does it do? It means he makes a constitutional law out of it, because then the Constitutional Court is not allowed to prove it. So they wrote it in our Constitution that women can retire at the age of 60. But because it looks a bit silly, and maybe if they write it in the Constitution, they can never ever change it again, maybe they won't have 2/3 of the votes, which was right. They said, but it's not forever. In 35 years it will change. And now the 35 years are over. And this is really great, because right now, when we have the problem with the demographic change, the 35 years started to be over. This is by incident. I met one old politician who was there at this decision. And I told him the story, and he said, wow, now you see how far we were looking into the future. Okay. So this is, I would say, a very good message in the field of lack of workers and demographic change. When I tell this story, I often have the opportunity to talk about a lot of employers and and big companies, not great companies, big companies. When I have the opportunity to talk, often I feel that some of the boomers in the audience don't feel happy about my message. When they were searching for additional workforce, they were not thinking about women between 60 and 65. And I said, no, you don't get them. They just stay in the companies for 1 year longer, or half year longer, or 1.5 years longer. The ones you maybe can get, because now a lot of companies are searching for qualified workers, are the women who would replace them. And which these are normally not 18 years old women or 25. They are normally, for instance, women after the maternity leave, for instance. So they work part-time and replace a woman that have been to ich weiß nicht, wie man Altersteilzeit übersetzt. There is a part-time and subsidized part-time work for older people. So this is a classical replacement. So, okay, this is a good news. We have another good news in Austria where to find additional workers, because we have a very weak childcare opening hours. In Vienna they are good, so you have a whole day and whole year childcare facilities compared to the other federal states in Austria. But how far you go to Tyrol, Salzburg, and so on, you often find only childcare facilities until lunch. So, and there is room for improvement. If we open up the childcare facilities also in the afternoon, you have more workers on the labor market, at least more hours worked on the labor market. So, okay, so labor market forecast 2025, 2026. Last year, it's interesting, because it brings us a bit nearer to the future of work. I'm sorry, I'm looking a long time in the past. We had an economic growth about 1% less. So 1% less goods and services were produced in Austria last year, okay? So we are in a recession, and this is the second year, and we hope that we won't have a third year of recession next year, or this year. 1% less real change in GDP, which is really bad news. But although we produced about 1% or 0.9% less goods and services, we have 4,406 more employees. So more people produced less goods. Why? Because they're lazy? No. Maybe.
Fewer hours?
Yes, that's the reason for it. We all work less hours. And that's very interesting, because your own individual productivity was going down because people work less hours. Who is working less hours? Is it a female or a male topic? Don't make bad jokes now. Okay. What do you say? It's interesting. No, it's a male topic right now. Working time of men is going down. 75% of the reduction of working time is male. Why? What are they doing? Nothing really worth to mention, but a bit more family care. So, for instance, the 1 month, wie heißt das, Papa-Monat, the 1 month where the father can stay at home, or 2 month parental leave. A bit, and they are working less overtime hours. I have 3 sons. My oldest one is Vincent. Vincent is 28. He studied politics in Vienna and is now working for the Green Party. When he finished his studies, he was searching a job, a 20-hour job. And my reaction was, I would say, suitable to a boomer with gray hair. I said, why? You're neither a musician nor a father. Why are you searching for a 20-hour job? My reaction was silly. There are changes now. Before COVID, we had here 40% of all vacancies are placed via the Public Employment Service, my institution. And before COVID, we had, I don't know how many, 70% of the vacancies were full-time contracts. And when at that time, a young academic was asking for an application to this job and had a job interview, and then within the interview, he or she said, I want to work 30 hours a week. The normal reaction at that time was, you're not able to read, or what are you saying? I'm searching for someone working full-time, maybe not 40, 50, 60 hours. Now, because of changes in the market, and now we have an employee market for the good one, for the good qualified people, it's so that I have 20,000 vacancies right now where it says full-time, if you wish, also part-time. I had none of these vacancies before. And now if someone says, I want to only work 30 hours, the HR leader would say, nice. This is the difference. Within a very short period, we were switching from higher unemployment rate to an employee market. And this is very interesting because it was very difficult for the Austrian companies. So, yesterday I had to publish the unemployment figures as every month. That's why you sometimes see me on the media. And I had bad figures. Unemployment is rising by about 7%. In industry, we have a really deep recession. Unemployment is rising in industry sector about 15%. And I have no good news because in 2025, WIFO says we have 0.6% growth, which is very little. And these figures are wrong. We already know. I talked with Gabriel Felbermeier, the boss of WIFO, and he said we have to reduce it, and we have to reduce it because of 2 reasons. One reason is industry is not recovering, so it's about, I don't know, 0.3, 0.4. And the second reason is because of the austerity package of the government now. So there will be a small plus, but 0.1, 0.2, something like that. So unemployment is going up, but all the companies have to be prepared about a lack of skilled workers in the future. Why? So this is the population forecast for people between 15 and 64. So the working age population normally is called. And until 2050, which is not so difficult to estimate because most of the people are born already, so you know them. But of course, there is also the question of how strong is immigration, of course. Within this Statistic Austria, there is an average migration calculated in about 15,000 a year, which is compared to what I showed you much lower. but there was the opening of the European Union, a war in Ukraine, and the conflict in Syria and the refugee crisis. So hopefully not all of these things will happen again so soon. But so within this population forecast, you see that in all Austrian, Burgenland, Kärnten, Niederösterreich, Upper Austria, and so on, in every federal state you have a strong increase, a decrease, and only in Vienna you have an increase. But as I told you before, it's not so important how big the population is. It's more important how many of those people are working or on the labor market. And we know that more people are working. This is work. It doesn't say anything about how many hours, but more and more people are on the labor market. And this is that slide, labor force forecast until 2015. You see, in Vienna it's 10% plus, which is a bad news, a really bad news for me, because unemployment rate in Vienna is about 10%. In Upper Austria it's 4%, in Salzburg is 4%, in Tyrol it's about 4.5%. So the unemployment rate in Vienna is the highest in Austria. And in this market, more and more people are incoming. You have international migration and you have inner Austrian migration. I mean, it's not the right place to ask, but I was introduced as a real Viennese, which is quite, there are not many in Vienna, real Viennese people. Most of the people come from any other, for instance, Upper Austria, any other. So, I was in Carinthia visiting the social partners and the politicians and was asking them, what are you doing against it? 14% less workers on your labor market, 14. Which means, and this is on average, and in Carinthia, of course, they also have people moving to Villach and people moving to Klagenfurt, to the cities, which means in certain valleys they have 25% less workers. And the interesting thing in Carinthia is that the whole population is not going down, the whole. Because you have pension migration. You have older Germans that move to Wörthersee when they are 65 plus. Welcome. So they need workers. So what are you doing with that figure? And the answer was interesting. The answer was, well, of course we are trying to find workers abroad. At the Philippine island we have been to a huge, wie sagt man Messe, Verzeihung? Fair, where we made we gave a speech about coming to Carinthia and so on. And I said, well, that's interesting, but every federal state in Austria does it. What is your difference? And they said, well, I don't know. What should we do? And I said, what about taking one single Syrian family from Vienna to every municipality in Carinthia? And they looked at me and said, well, 40% people of Carinthia voted FPÖ. We don't like that idea. But I think we will need such answers, because otherwise they will get a really big problem because of demographic change. So, current challenges. Economic development, I already said. We have a new government. Luckily, we have a new government. I'm very grateful for that. They have some plans for, it looks like more money for the Public Employment Service. In fact, it's not really more money because of certain tricks, but okay. At least it is not less money in an austerity situation. We have digitalization, ecologization, demographic change, migration, of course. So, okay, I will come to that point. And we have huge challenges for the HR departments of the Austrian companies, because they are not used to be a good employer and do employer branding. Not at all, because it was always easy to find stuff. In many HR departments, they are no expert of employer branding. So the Public Employment Service has a program where we pay consultancy. Consultancy out of the market, well-known companies, just for instance, Deloitte is one quite known company, where more than 80 consultants are working for the Public Employment Service. We pay them. And we send them to companies to work 10 days with the companies on certain topics that are important for the company, but also topics we like. And in the past, it was about, for instance, an aging workforce, how to deal with an aging workforce or such things. In 2022, 2023, 2021, the whole topic was employer branding, how to become an attractive employer, it was all about, I would say, changes in what young candidates want to do, a change in I think it's people valuing well-being, prioritizing, I would say, CSR concepts and value and personal development. It was, about new values, about purpose-driven work, and so on. There are companies like Greenpeace that have no problems finding stuff, and also a lot of social companies are doing quite well in finding stuff, because it's easy to communicate the value of the job, the purpose of the job, and this is something the candidates are looking for. People want the flexibilization of working hours, of course, free time, home office, and so on, work-life blending, sense economy. What I brought here this is a song I released on the 1st of May in last year, my own first song. It's called More from Life. And it's especially about that conflict, the conflict between boomers and candidates that want something different. It's a dance song. Okay. My DJ name is LL.M if you want to look it up. Okay? You find it in Spotify and whatever else. Okay. So, I said we need more workers. How to find them? The answer of politicians is always the first one. Third country recruitment. It's always the same. You find it everywhere in every political decision, in every political discussion. We're talking about the so-called Rot-Weiß-Rot-Karte. And there is a lot of political discussions about it, a lot of programs. There are a lot of, always the answer is we have to push, we have to find, for instance, healthcare workers in the Philippines, and we have to find technicians in India or in Eastern Europe or something like that. When you look in the past, over the last 10 years, on average, there are 2,500 people with the Rot-Weiß-Rot-Karte came to Austria. 2,500 on average in a year. 500 of them were soccer playing, tennis player, or something like that. Ice hockey, as a sportsman. 2,000 people a year. This was the whole success of the Rot-Weiß-Rot-Karte over the last year. I told you that from the European Union, about 30,000 a year came. And we always focus on that point because we don't like the other points to work on. The other point is work longer. When you look at the new government program, there are some changes in retirement age, but very little ones. Employment of women, of course. This is a question of the opening hour and the facilities of childcare. This is a good idea, not easy, costs a lot of money, and people often also don't want to. This is a point, as I told you to Carinthia, we have to use the migrants that came without red card. We have to use the migrants that came for other reasons to Austria, which are the refugees. And over the last 10 years, politicians said, if we integrate them, then maybe more will come. And this was the wrong politics. Of course, we have to try to close our borders. Of course, we have social problems with migration, but we have to integrate them that are here. This is, I would say, there is no alternative to, and it's cheaper to integrate them than not to integrate them. And of course, it's interesting to find out, for instance, the average Syrian person is higher educated in Austria than the average Syrian person in Germany. Why do you presume, what do you think why? The better qualified Syrians come to Austria than to Germany. Why? It's a very hard question.
We are nicer. That works.
Okay. We discussed it very long between the Bundesagentur für Arbeit, which is the Austrian, the German Public Employment Service, and us. We discussed it for a long time. Scientists discussed it. We checked the data again. We can't explain why there are more academics in Austria than in Germany and so on. And at the end, we agreed on an answer which is not scientific. We agreed on the answer, maybe you have to have a higher education to know Austria. Maybe that's the reason for it, why more qualified people come to Austria. Yeah, I'm sure you heard of the joke, no kangaroos in Austria, yeah? It's a joke, but there is a proof in it. People don't know Austria. And that's why it's very hard for the Austrian state to motivate foreigners to come to Austria. We are competing with Germany, with Japan, with the United States on the whole planet for good skilled workers. And for instance, the Germans are spending dozens of millions to build schools, for instance, at the Philippines or Indonesia, schools where you teach nurturing. And during the whole studies, you get German language skills over the years. They have agreements with China, for instance, that the young people working for Volkswagen China, Audi China, Porsche, whatever, are taught in the German dual apprenticeship system, and German, and then they ask half of them to come to Germany. You know what Austria is doing? We are on such a fair with a sign, and on the sign there is a mountain with it, and say it's so nice. As you said, we are nicer. Yeah, that's the way we're competing, because we are not big enough, not known enough, and have not money enough. So we have to use other things. We have to use our own workforce. Just to give you one example, in our consultancy project, there was a cleaning company, an Upper Austrian cleaning company. You have a lot of female cleaners, mostly migrant cleaners, and then you have about, it was 20 men. They were called Objektbetreuer. So they were the one in charge for the contracts. They were checking if everything was clean. They were making the negotiations with the customers and so on. They were all men. They were no migrants. They were all Austrian men, and cleaning were migrant women. Classical situation. And the companies couldn't find any of these person in charge anymore. They couldn't find any. And they asked us for help, and we said, well, let's have a look. And then we checked all their stuff and found 6 cleaners that were good enough for getting an higher education and training for 6 months, and become suddenly person in charge for objects. And that changed the whole company, because suddenly there was no barrier between those jobs anymore. Suddenly there was a person in charge that were able to speak the language of the person who cleans the room and so on. So such projects were something where things changed because of an employee market. That's I would say, a good development. So yeah, of course, I do have unemployed persons too. Most companies are searching for, in fact, they are searching for men. I'm sorry, but in fact, they are searching for men, because we don't got the baby. They are searching for experienced people. There is nearly no vacancies where you say we take someone without any experience. They are searching for no older workers. They are searching for healthy workers, and they don't like long-term unemployed people. Estimate how many of my 350,000 unemployed people are men, middle-aged, not long-term unemployed, Austrian. How many? 8%. So 8%. So which means maybe they should change the way they recruit. Maybe they should take older workers. Maybe it's not a good idea to write in a job description, we are a young team. It's not a good idea. Change these things, then you find workers. So, and of course, automatization AI is also a possible future. Let's come to that. Will we still working I'm too long, I think. I'm sorry, I go on. Will we be still working tomorrow? This is a very old question. The question is first raised 1800. It was the first time people say, well, because of great inventions, and the first one was the steam engine, and then in the production of the textile sector. Suddenly it was possible with an engine to produce so much clothes like 1,000 women did in a whole year at home. That was the beginning of the question, will we be still working tomorrow? And these waves here, maybe I'm sure you heard of it, are the Kondratiev waves. He's a Russian, he was a Russian economist, and he described these waves, first, or circles. The first one is the steam engine, then the railway, electricity, automotive sector, a problem for Austria right now, where we really benefited a lot by the Germans building the car, we delivering the spare parts and the parts for it. Then it was the PC and the personal computer and the internet and so on, and now the most scientists say AI is the next Kondratiev wave. On that wave, there was always an enormous change on the labor market. An enormous change on the labor market. There were always persons losing their job, but at the end, there were more jobs than before. Even in the textile production sector, more workers were before than the ones did with the, I think, loom. Loom is the word for where they produce the textiles. Yeah. Enormous change, and just think of the, for instance, just of Vienna, the moment electricity not was invented but broadened into a city, how many jobs were new? When you have to dig up the whole city to light every building, to have the possibility to have, and of course people were losing their jobs. I have brought you one example of someone who loses their jobs. This is a very old poster. I have it at home. I like it, really nice, where it says 40,000 musicians will get unemployed. And the reason for it is here. You shouldn't go to a sound film. This is, then you kill jobs. You shouldn't hear broadcast, and you shouldn't use a gramophone. Only real music from musicians is good. That's the only possibility to save these jobs. Well, I'm sorry, but they're all dead now. Yeah. Okay. What has changed over the last 30 years? These are the Austrian unemployment rates by the highest education. It's a very boring slide because you see nearly three lines. You have a green one. The green one is the unemployment rate of persons who studied, who have an academic degree. So the slide starts in 1990. So within the last 33 years, there was nearly no change. The blue one is the unemployment rate of people having done a higher higher secondary school, which means Matura in Austria or Abitur in Germany. You see, it was 1% higher, but there was also nearly no change. But in 2015, it started to increase. Why? These were the refugees. There are a lot of Syrian and Afghanistan people who have higher secondary school. But when you look at the Austrians, the line is the same. Okay? And the yellow one is the one that have done an apprenticeship, which is about the double than the academics. But these figures are also higher because of some of these people, or not only few of them, are working in seasonal sectors like tourism or construction. So they have the winter unemployment, for instance. So, but this is a boring slide because nothing happened over the last 33 years. And I give you a fourth line. This is that one. And this is the unemployment rate of people that have just done compulsory school. In the same time, nothing happened in here. The unemployment rate of the persons with compulsory school doubled. And this is the biggest problem on the labor market, in fact. Although these are not more persons than here, because we managed to get more and more people a higher education. We are the state that is quite known for its training guarantee in Austria. So every pupil who is not able to find a company for doing an apprenticeship can do their apprenticeship via the Public Employment Service. We are spending 250 million euros a year for training about 10,000 young people to bring them from that line to that line. And we are quite successful, but nevertheless, these jobs are shrinking, which means when here we had these jobs for someone working for a company, maybe for bringing paper to another department, and now of course we have an electronic email and electronic systems for using this. So these jobs are going away, and this is the biggest problem. This is the Austrian figure. In Vienna, every 3 out of 10 people just have done compulsory school are unemployed right now. 3 out of 10, and by the academics, it's 2.5 out of 100. So it's really an enormous problem on the labor market. So last 2 slides. How we will work tomorrow? When you find that and Google that, you find a lot of word clouds because they are modern now. I don't like them, so I give you the next slide. You work more flexible, more digital, more international, and more ecological. These are the most important changes, I would say, on the labor market. More flexible means flexible in working time, of course. It's about gig work, contract worker, freelancing, hybrid working. It's about flexible in working time, of course. If there was anything good with COVID, then it was I would say, more digital in 2020. It's about remote work. It's about automatization. It's about AI. A huge change in that field. We work more international, where we really have big problems because of labor law and social security systems. We already have people who, in fact, work for a German company, or Germans work for an Austrian company. We have Ukrainian people that live here and work 5 days a week for an Ukrainian company, which is not allowed, not able in our tax system. It's not allowed in our security system, and no one knows how to solve it. All the state borders make no sense in a digital job market, not at all. It's just some months ago where a podcast was done where I talk with my colleague from Poland. So she was in Warsaw, I was in Vienna. The owner of the podcast was the European Commission, so Brussels. The sound company was in Berlin, and the moderator was in home office in London. And when you listen to the podcast, you assume that we're sitting next to each other. So there is absolutely no technological borders in transferring work, knowledge work. That's the difference. How many workers in Austria would you presume have never been in home office during COVID? How many? The percentage? Never been. Because we all feel we all have been to home office. How many have never been to home office? 10%, 20%, 30, 40? 60. 60%. That's important to know because all experts tend to give their expertise on their view. 60% have never been to home office. So this is something, I would say, a bonus point for people working in an intellectual way. That's the difference. So, and more ecological, of course. These, I would say, when you separate the groups in 3, in that field, you find the first group. This is not really important. These are new jobs. Jobs that occur, that arise, that have never been before. For instance, when you think of smart cities, and there are certain technological jobs where you need a smart city scientist to transfer energy and such things. The first. Or we have made now climbing courses for electricians for these wind power. I don't know, maybe it has the wind turbines. Yeah, wind turbines. The second thing is more of the same. We need more train conductors because we have more public transport, for instance. The job hasn't changed at all. but we need a lot of more of them. And the third group is the most interesting thing is we have to, about 60% of all our jobs will need additional competences or different competences. When you look, for instance, at a roofer, the job of a roofer, then suddenly a roofer makes solar panel installation. He suddenly has to be able to produce green roof constructions, such things. So there is an enormous need for qualification and training of existing workers. This is the biggest job within the new government program. I had the opportunity to write down a program where there is a subsidy for companies that train their own workers for that field. This is one idea. So these, I would say, are the most relevant. And the last slide is, in fact, the answer which I should have gotten. Thank you.